Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Kirst. Picture this. You're a trucker driving through the dark Appalachian Mountains at 2 a.m. Your headlights cut through the fog and suddenly you see something that shouldn't be there. Something that makes your blood run cold. Today I've got 9 true horror stories from truckers who experience the unexplainable in these haunted mountains. These aren't made-up tales. These actually happen to real drivers just trying to do their job. But first, smash that subscribe button and hit the like if you're brave enough to hear what's coming. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Trust me, after hearing these stories, you'll never look at mountain roads the same way again. I was 38 when this happened, and honestly, I thought I knew every inch of highway between Memphis and Charlotte. Had to. Regulatory compliance was my whole job. I'd been driving commercial for 15 years, never had so much as a parking ticket because I couldn't afford to. My parents were getting older, needed help with their medical bills, and my CDL was the only thing keeping food on all our tables. So when I tell you I knew every way station, every rest stop, every mile marker on that route, I mean it. I'd driven Interstate 40 through the Smoky Mountains probably 300 times. That's why the sign made no sense. It was July 15th, middle of the night, and I was hauling a load of refrigerated strawberries from a farm outside Nashville to a distributor in Asheville. Time-sensitive cargo, but everything was legal. Weight, permits, log books, the whole 9 yards. I'd driven this exact same route the day before with a load of furniture, and there definitely hadn't been any construction signs, any road work, nothing about a new way station. But there it was. New way station, 1 mile. All commercial vehicles must stop. I remember staring at that sign in my headlights, trying to make sense of it. New way stations don't just appear overnight. There's months of construction, permits, environmental impact studies. I would have known about it. Hell, I would have gotten memos from my company about it, but I couldn't skip it either. Getting caught bypassing a way station is an automatic violation, and violations meant losing my CDL. My family depended on that license. So I started slowing down, looking for this station that supposedly existed. What I found didn't make any sense either. The facility was massive, bigger than any way station I'd ever seen. Modern looking, with LED lights bright enough to make the whole area look like daytime. But it was completely empty. No other trucks, no DOT officers, no signs of life at all. Just this pristine, glowing facility sitting in what I could have sworn was just forest the day before. I pulled onto the scales anyway. The lights went green, the electronic display showed my truck information, all correct. But then it showed I was overweight by 10,000 pounds. That was impossible. I'd weighed the load myself that morning, and I hadn't stopped anywhere since then except for fuel. The cargo was exactly what it should be. A screen by the driver's side window lit up with instructions. Proceed to Inspection Bay 3 for mandatory safety inspection. I tried to put the truck in gear to move forward, but nothing happened. The engine was running, but the truck wouldn't move. Then I tried to open my door to get out and check what was wrong, but the handle wouldn't budge. The windows wouldn't roll down either. I was locked inside my own cab. That's when I saw the first inspector walking toward my truck. He was wearing a DOT uniform, but it looked old, like something from the 1950s. He had a clipboard in his hand and was walking in this weird, jerky way, like his joints weren't quite working right. But his face was completely serious, professional, like this was just another day at work. He tapped on my window and pointed toward the inspection bay. I tried to tell him my doors were stuck, but he just smiled and walked away. Then, somehow, my truck started moving forward on its own, rolling slowly toward the bay he'd indicated. More inspectors appeared as I rolled forward, one in a 1960s uniform, another in something from the 1970s. They all had that same jerky walk, that same professional demeanor, but they were asking me questions I could hear through the glass. Questions about cargo I'd never carried, routes I'd never driven. "Mr. Rodriguez," one of them called out, reading FRA. "M. a clipboard. You're being cited for failure to report thought crimes committed between mile markers 247 and 251. Another one started writing on a form. Also, unlicensed dreaming while operating a commercial vehicle. I watched blank violation forms appear on clipboards and start filling themselves out. The fines were impossible, hundreds of thousands of dollars for violations that didn't exist. And the clock on my dashboard was running backward, then forward, then stopping completely. The inspector's movements seemed to match whatever the clock was doing. That's when I noticed the other trucks. They were parked in bays around the inspection area, maybe a dozen of them. The drivers were sitting in their cabs, but their eyes were empty, staring straight ahead. One truck looked like it was from the 1980s, another even older. How long had they been here? The fine calculation on the screen kept growing. $847,293,761.42, with interest being added from future dates that hadn't happened yet. Then a manager appeared, except his face looked like a composite of all the other inspectors combined, and when he spoke, it sounded like all their voices in harmony. "Mr. Rodriguez," the manager said, "you have two options. You can join our inspection team and help us process other drivers, or you can remain in processing indefinitely. These are the only choices available." I thought about my parents, about losing my CDL, about never seeing my family again. But then I remembered something from all my years of dealing with DOT regulations. There's always paperwork for everything, always forms that have to be filed. "I want to file Form 2290, I said. "Heavy vehicle use tax form. You can't process any commercial vehicle without it." Every inspector froze. The manager's composite face flickered like a TV with bad reception. "Form 2290? He asked. But his voice was uncertain now, not harmonious. "Yeah, and I need the 8849 for fuel tax credits and the MCS 150 update form. You can't complete processing without all the federal forms." They started looking at each other, her confused. Papers were shuffling, clipboards being checked. One inspector walked into another one. The manager's face was shifting, trying to hold together. We don't have those forms," one of them finally admitted. That's when everything started falling apart. The walls of the way station became transparent. I could see the real highway through them, cars driving by normally. The other truck drivers started waking up, looking around confused and angry. "How long have I been here?" one of them shouted. "What year is it?" Everyone started ramming their trucks against the bay doors. The scales were exploding, papers burning, inspectors running in circles, melting and reforming like they were made of wax. One young inspector, maybe the only real one, ran up to my window and whispered, "I was like you once. Drive through that wall, it's not solid. Hurry." I gunned the engine and drove straight at what looked like a concrete wall. My truck passed right through it like it was made of mist. Behind me, I could see other trucks following, some of them decades old, but still running. The way station collapsed in on itself like it was being sucked into a black hole. When I checked my clock on the highway, only 5 minutes had passed since I'd seen that first sign. My strawberries were still fresh, the temperature in the trailer perfect, but some of the other drivers who escaped, they'd aged 20 years. Others looked younger than when they went in. I started meeting other drivers at truck stops who'd had similar experiences. Different locations, different years, but always the same pattern. Way stations that appeared overnight, impossible violations, the offer to join the inspectors or stay forever. The DOT says no such facilities exist, but they can't explain the reports that keep coming in. Old-timers at truck stops just shake their heads and say, "Yeah, the phantom scales don't stop if it wasn't there yesterday." I keep Form 2290 in my wallet now like a talisman. It saved me twice more, once near Beckley, once outside Knoxville. Same situation, same impossible fines, same offer. But every time I mention the missing forms, the whole thing falls apart. I still drive that route, but I'm paranoid about every way station now. My son asks why I photograph every scale house we pass, why I keep detailed logs of which ones exist on which days. I tell him it's just being thorough, but really, it's because I'm terrified I never actually left that first one. There's a group of us now, drivers who've encountered the phantom scales. We text each other regularly. "You still in the real world?" Station at mile marker 186 wasn't there yesterday. Stay in the left lane. Sometimes I see ghost trucks on the highway. drivers with empty eyes still processing violations that don't exist. I leave notes in truck stop bathrooms. If the way station wasn't there yesterday, keep driving. The worst part is the dreams. I'll dream I'm still in that inspection bay, still arguing about forms while my family gets older and forgets about me. I wake up checking the calendar, counting the days, making sure I haven't lost time. Looking back now, I think maybe exhaustion creates places for exhausted people. Maybe there are roads that have extra stops that don't let go. All I know is I keep moving, keep checking those forms and hope I'm still in the right world. Because honestly, how would I know if I wasn't? I was 39 when I picked up that load from Stillwater Morgue, and honestly, I thought I'd seen it all by then. 15 years driving truck, not one accident on my record, and nothing ever rattled me much. Used to be a Marine before I got into trucking, so I figured I could handle whatever came my way. Of course, being divorced with 2 kids I only see every other weekend changes your perspective on what risks are worth taking. Child support doesn't pay itself, and the morgue contract was good money. Real good money for what was supposed to be a simple run moving funeral supplies from their old facility to the new one across state. The whole thing felt off from the start, but when you're looking at 3 months of payments in one job, you don't ask too many questions. They wanted me there at 2 a.m. sharp, no staff around, just keys under the mat and a forklift already fueled up. Self-load, they called it, which should have been my first red flag. I mean, who makes a driver load his own trailer with funeral equipment at 2 in the morning? But the dispatcher said it was standard procedure for their sensitive materials, and the pay stub had enough zeros on it to quiet my concerns. Those coffins were heavier than they had any right to be. Every single one wrapped tight in thick plastic sheeting labeled "Do Not Open Fumigated" in red letters that looked like they'd been stamped in a hurry. Empty pine boxes shouldn't weigh much, but I was struggling with that forklift. And when I hit the scales leaving the facility, my rig was showing 15,000 pounds overweight. Impossible for empty wood, but I figured maybe they were made from some dense hardwood, or maybe there was equipment packed inside. The plastic made it hard to tell, and I wasn't about to unwrap fumigated goods to satisfy my curiosity. The first thump came at the first red light about 10 miles out. Just once, like some. Everything had shifted in the trailer when I braked. Could have been a coffin sliding forward. Happens all the time with loose cargo. But then I caught that smell seeping through the cab vents. Formaldehyde, which made sense given where I'd picked up the load, but underneath that was something else. Something sweet and organic that made my stomach turn. I cracked the window to clear it out, but it kept getting stronger. By the time I hit the interstate, I was hearing scratching sounds from back there, rhythmic, like someone tapping out a pattern. Morse code, maybe, though I couldn't make sense of it. I pulled over at the next truck stop and walked around to check the trailer doors. The lock was still intact, but when I got close, I could swear I saw fingers poking through the gap between the doors. Just for a second, then gone. Had to be my eyes playing tricks, stress and highway hypnosis making me see things. That's when I heard the whisper, clear as day, coming from inside the trailer. "We're not dead. We're not dead. We're not dead." Over and over, like a prayer or a chant. My blood went ice cold, and I was already reaching for my phone when it started ringing. The morgue director, sounding panicked as hell. "Did you pick them up?" he asked. And when I said yes, there was this long silence before he started talking real fast about how there'd been a mistake, how I needed to bring them back immediately. "Those aren't normal bodies," he said, and his voice was shaking. "They're from the 1950s outbreak, part of some medical trial that went wrong. They're not dead, they're dormant, and the movement, the diesel exhaust, it's waking them up." He was rambling about suspended animation experiments, military cover-ups, how they'd been stored and forgotten for decades. But I could hear them moving around back there, and through my mirrors, I could see the trailer doors bulging, outward like something was pushing from inside. One of the coffins must have broken open because I could see a figure walking around in the trailer through the small window. When he noticed me, watching, he waved, actually waved at me, then mouthed, "Help us," against the glass. He looked normal enough, pale as paper, but human. That somehow made it worse than if he'd been some mindless zombie. The truth, When I finally Googled the names they started writing on the trailer walls, was worse than any horror movie. 47 people who'd volunteered for what they thought was a flu vaccine trial back in 1954, all officially declared dead in the same week when the experimental treatment put them in some kind of suspended state. The military had covered it up, stored the bodies, and apparently forgot about them for 70 years. They'd been conscious the whole time, decades of darkness, unable to move or speak, listening to the world change around them. They wrote messages to me through the trailer gaps, scratching letters into the metal with their fingernails. They weren't angry at me. They were grateful, desperate for someone to finally help them. When I agreed to change course and drive them to the state capitol instead of the new facility, they tapped "thank you" in Morse code against the trailer walls. The sound went from frantic to calm, almost peaceful. The hardest part was the fuel stop. They went silent when we pulled in, playing dead again while the attendant filled the tank. He kept looking at the trailer suspiciously, said he thought he heard movement, but I covered by saying it was just the load settling. At the police checkpoint 20 miles out from the Capitol, they held their breath while the officer inspected the trailer. 47 people staying perfectly still, pretending to be corpses while their real corpse was about to be exposed. When the officer finally waved us through, they tapped out "You're a good man" on the trailer floor. They used the rest of the drive to tell me their stories, scratching words into every available surface in "das his." Eyed that trailer. Decades of sensory deprivation, listening to their families grieve, hearing themselves declared dead while fully conscious and unable to scream. I recorded what I could through the gaps with my phone, testimonies that would later bring down 3 government agencies and launch the biggest medical ethics investigation in history. When I opened those trailer doors on the Capitol steps, 47 people walked out into sunlight they hadn't seen since Eisenhower was president. They were crying, all of them, squinting in the light but walking on their own power. Someone had already called the news, probably the morgue director trying to get ahead of the story, and the cameras were rolling when they emerged. The government response was immediate. Black SUVs, men in suits trying to contain the situation. But it was too late. The whole world was watching. Medical tests confirmed what I already knew. They were alive, had been alive the whole time. The story exploded across every news network, social media, everywhere. I lost my job for refusing orders and breaking the delivery contract, but the book deals and interview payments more than made up for it. More importantly, 38 of them found living descendants who'd thought they were dead for decades. Families reunited after 70 years of grief. I still drive truck, but I don't take morgue contracts anymore. And sometimes, late at night when I'm hauling through states where old medical facilities dot the landscape, I wonder how many other storage rooms are out there. How many other people are lying in boxes, labeled as dead, waiting for someone to hear them scratching at the walls. The government admitted to 47 cases, but the paperwork they released was so heavily redacted it looked like a crossword puzzle. To this day, I keep the recordings those people made in my trailer. Voices from the grave, telling stories that should never have happened. Sometimes I play them back when I'm feeling sorry for myself, and it puts things in perspective real quick. Whatever problems I've got, at least I can move, speak, see daylight. At least I'm not buried alive, listening to the world forget I ever existed. That load changed everything for me, not just the money or the fame, but understanding how thin the line is between living and dead, between being heard and being forgotten. Those 47 people taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just listen when someone's trying to tell you they're still here, still human, still deserving of help. I still get calls from families asking if I've heard anything about missing relatives from the 50s. I always tell them the same thing. Keep asking questions, keep looking, and if you hear scratching sounds coming from places where there shouldn't be anyone alive, don't assume you're imagining things. Sometimes the dead aren't dead at all. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to open the box and let them tell their story. I was 34 and had been driving trucks for 12 years when this happened. Maybe I was just exhausted that night at Switchback Pass, but I don't think so. My name's Dave Johnson, originally from Detroit, and I haul auto parts across the Midwest and Southeast. Been married to Sarah for 15 years, got 3 kids, Emma's 14 and needs braces. Jake's starting college in the fall, and little Mia just turned 7. Money's been tight lately, which is why I was pushing myself so hard that week, taking every run dispatch would give me. 4th night in a row on the road, and my body was telling me to quit. But the bills don't care if you're tired. I'd driven through Switchback Pass probably 100 times over the years. It's a winding mountain road that cuts through West Virginia coal country, saves about 2 hours if you know what you're doing. Most truckers avoid it because the grades are steep and the turns are tight. But I grew up driving in Detroit winters, so mountain roads never bothered me much. That night was different though. I can't explain how, but something felt off from the moment I started the climb. The air was thicker somehow, and my CB radio kept picking up static that sounded almost like whispers. By 2:30 a.m., I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Coffee wasn't working, energy drinks weren't working, even slapping myself in the face wasn't helping. My eyes were burning, and I kept drifting toward the shoulder. I had to stop, or risk killing myself and someone else. There's an old way station about halfway up the pass that's been abandoned for years. The state doesn't maintain it anymore, but it's got a wide parking area, and it's far enough off the main road that you won't get bothered by bears or curious locals. I pulled in at exactly 2:47 a.m. I remember because I checked my phone to text Sarah that I was stopping for mandatory rest. Locked all the e-doors, set the parking brake, checked my mirrors out of habit, cracked the windows just an inch for air circulation, then climbed back into my sleeper cab. It's not much, just a narrow bed behind the driver's seat with storage compartments and a small TV I never use. But after 12 years on the road, I could sleep anywhere. I put in my earbuds and started up a white noise app on my phone. Just needed 4 hours to reset. Then I could finish the run and be home by dinner. That's when the scratching started. At first, I figured it was a raccoon or possum getting into my undercarriage. Mountains are full of them, and they're always looking for food scraps or warm places to nest. The scratching was coming from underneath the truck, near the passenger side. I tried to ignore it, but it kept getting louder and more deliberate. Not random animal scratching, this had a pattern to it, like something was searching for a way in. Then I felt the truck rock slightly. Something was climbing up the passenger side, but I didn't hear footsteps or voices. No metal clanging against the steps or grab bars, just this subtle shifting of weight that made my stomach drop. I pulled out one earbud and listened, but there was nothing except that methodical scratching, now coming from multiple spots around the cab. That's when I noticed the temperature. My breath was starting to fog up, even though the heater was running full blast. Within minutes, there was actual ice forming on the inside of my windows. In October, in West Virginia, I could see my breath clearly now, and the cold was seeping into my bones in a way that didn't feel natural. Then came the smell. Wet dog mixed with copper pennies, coming through the vents even though they were closed. It was so strong it made me gag, and I had to breathe through my mouth. I checked the vents, and all the screws were tight, but somehow that metallic animal stench kept getting stronger. I happened to glance at my rearview mirror and nearly jumped out of my skin. It was slowly turning toward the sleeper curtain behind me. By itself. I wasn't touching it, wasn't bumping it, but it was rotating like someone was gently adjusting it from behind. I reached up to turn it back, and the metal was so cold it almost stuck to my fingers. That's when I heard the first screw drop. Then another. They were coming from inside the air vents, backing themselves out and falling onto my chest one by one. Tiny metallic plinks in the darkness. I tried to sit up, but my legs wouldn't move. The paralysis was spreading upward from my feet, and I was fully conscious but couldn't even scream. Something dark started pressing through the passenger side vent. It looked organic, like raw muscle without skin, and it was bigger than the vent opening should have allowed. As I watched in horror, all the vents started opening from the inside, coordinated, like whatever this thing was had multiple parts working together. It was about the size of a large dog, but wrong in every way that mattered. As it unfolded itself into my cab, I could see it had absorbed things: trucker caps, wedding rings, CB microphones, pieces of clothing, all embedded in its mass like it had digested other drivers and kept their belongings as trophies. Then a mouth formed in the center of its bulk. and it spoke in this tired, desperate voice. So tired. Need warmth. Decades cold. I realized this thing had been human once. A trucker who'd died up here and become something else. Something that fed on exhausted drivers who stopped at this exact spot. I could see faces in its mass now, previous victims, all with the same hollow, desperate expression. It extended part of itself toward me, almost gently, like an exhausted child reaching for a parent. The paralysis was complete now. I couldn't move anything except my eyes, but then I bit down hard on my tongue and the sharp pain broke through whatever was holding me. My left hand came free. I managed. Ed to turn the ignition key. The diesel engine roared to life, and the vibration made the thing lose cohesion for a second. Pieces of it fell to the floor with wet slapping sounds. It made this horrible noise, like air brakes mixed with dying animals, and started retreating toward the vents. The engine vibration gave me enough freedom to grab the gear shift. I threw it into drive and punched the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, but the thing was only half out of the cab. Part of it was still inside, part was being dragged alongside the truck, and it was trying desperately to reform itself. For 5 miles, I drove with this thing clinging to my cab, reaching through the vents, trying to get back inside. I cranked the heat up full blast and aimed all the vents at it. For some reason, the hot air seemed to hurt it. It kept retreating and trying again, like it was fighting between the need to feed and self-preservation. As the first light of dawn hit my windshield, the thing started to liquefy. It smelled like hot pennies now, and when I took a hard right turn, it finally lost its grip and splashed across my windshield like motor oil before sliding off. I drove straight through to the next truck stop without stopping. When I got out to inspect the damage, there were greasy handprints all over the passenger side of my cab, and I still had those vent screws in my pocket. I took a photo with my phone, and you can clearly see a dark shadow in the sleeper area that shouldn't be there. At the truck stop, I met another driver who took one look at me and knew. He rolled up his sleeve and showed me scars on his forearm that looked like something had tried to pull him through a small opening. "You saw it too," he said. Wasn't a question. He told me he'd been leaving warnings on trucker forums for years. Don't stop at Switchback Way Station. I started doing the same. Posted on every forum and CB channel I could find, trying to warn other drivers. But the thing is, it only happens when you're exhausted. 4th night in a row, same time of night, when your defenses are down and you're desperate enough to stop anywhere for rest. Could have been a hallucination from sleep deprivation, except I still have those vent screws. The mechanic who looked at my truck couldn't explain the damage to the vents or how they'd been unscrewed from the inside. 3 other drivers have contacted me with identical stories from that same location, different years but same details. I looked it up later. The state removed that way station from official maps in 1987, but it's still there. My doctor documented the temporary paralysis symptoms I described, said there was no medical explanation for what I experienced. Weather data from that night shows the temperature dropped 40 degrees in a 1-mile radius around that exact spot, but nowhere else. My company's security camera system recorded something that night, but they deleted the footage and won't talk about it. The tow truck driver I asked about the area just shook his head and said, "Yeah, we don't go there after midnight." I can't sleep in my truck anymore. I switched to local delivery routes, home every night, even though it means less money. Sarah notices I check all the air vents in our house obsessively, making sure the screws are tight. The kids ask why I'm different now, why I wake up in a cold sweat, checking locks and windows. Sometimes I still wake up paralyzed, smelling pennies, and Sarah has to hold me until it passes. She doesn't ask questions anymore. She just holds me. Maybe exhaustion makes us see things that aren't there. Maybe things wait in certain places for exhausted people to find them. Looking back now, I honestly don't know which possibility is worse. But I do know I'll never drive through Switchback Pass again. And I still leave those warnings on the forums every few months, just in case someone else is desperate enough to stop there on their 4th night in a row. Back when I was 27, I was working as an over-the-road trucker. Name's Mike Chen, originally from Nashville. I'd been doing IT work for about 5 years after college, but honestly, I was burning out hard. Sitting in a cubicle all day, dealing with other people's computer problems, never seeing sunlight, it was killing me slowly. So I got my CDL and started hauling freight cross-country. The pay wasn't amazing, but I loved the freedom. Just me, the road, and whatever podcast I felt like listening to that week. I'm single, no kids, so it worked out perfect. I could disappear for weeks at a time and nobody really missed me. I'd been trucking for about 8 months when this happened. The week before, I'd installed a signal booster on my CB radio. One of those aftermarket jobs that's probably not entirely legal but gets you crazy range in the mountains. I was excited to test it out on my next run through Appalachia. There's something peaceful about driving those mountain roads at night, especially with a new moon. No light pollution, just your headlights cutting through the darkness and maybe catching a glimpse of deer eyes in the tree line. I was hauling a load of electronics from the port in Savannah up to Columbus, Ohio. The manifest said I was carrying about 78,000 pounds, but I knew I was probably closer to 80,000. Nothing too crazy, but enough that I was avoiding the way stations just to be safe. I'd planned my route to go through eastern Kentucky, then up through West Virginia. Mostly back roads, but that's how I liked it anyway. It was a Thursday night, maybe 11:30 p.m., and I was coming up on this ridge they call Crow's Nest. Real name's probably something else, but that's what all the truckers call it because you can see for miles in every direction during the day. At night, though, it's just this black void on both sides of the road. I'd been scanning through the CB channels, picking up conversations from truckers 3 states away thanks to my new booster. The reception was crystal clear, clearer than I'd ever heard before. I was channel surfing, just listening to random chatter, when I accidentally hit 19.5. Now, anyone who's used a CB knows they don't make half channels. The frequencies jump from 19 to 20, no in between. But there I was, parked on 19.5, and I was hearing something. At first, it was just this robotic voice reading off numbers. 47, 12, 88, 3. Then it would pause for maybe 10 seconds and repeat the same sequence. I thought maybe it was some kind of number station. You know, those weird military or spy broadcasts you sometimes pick up late at night. But then I realized something that made my blood go cold. Those numbers, read backwards, were my exact GPS coordinates. I tried to change the channel, but the dial wouldn't budge. It was like it was locked in place. I had to just sit there and listen. After maybe 5 minutes, the voice changed. It wasn't the robotic voice anymore. It was my mother's voice, clear as day, still reciting those same coordinates. Then it started listing other things, my social security number, my birth date, my blood type, even the password to my email account. That's when I started hearing other voices breaking through. Panicked truckers saying things like, "Help me," and "I can't change my channel," and "It's been 1987 for 3 hours now." I looked at my clock. It still read 11:47 p.m. I'd been driving for at least an hour, but time wasn't moving. Then I started picking up CB chatter that sounded old. Truckers talking about Reagan like he was still president, complaining about gas prices that hadn't existed in decades. These weren't recordings. I could hear the static, the natural pauses, the way voices fade in and out on CB. But they were talking about things from 197.8. The voice on 19.5 spoke again, and this time it used my name. Mike Chen, pending coordinates updating. My dashboard lights started pulsing in rhythm with the numbers. The speedometer needle was jumping to match the pattern. I tried to think of something else, anything else, but whatever thought I had, the radio would broadcast it back at me in that same robotic voice. That's when I saw them. Trucks parked on the side of the road, just sitting there in the darkness. I could see the glow of CB radios through their windshields, all tuned to 19.5. There was a 70s Peterbilt, an 80s Kenworth, a 90s Freightliner. The trucks looked exactly like they would have when they were new, no rust, no wear, just sitting there with their drivers inside staring at their radios. I understood then what was happening. This signal, whatever it was, collected truckers, trapped them in their moment. I heard a voice come through asking about me, someone wondering if anyone had seen Mike Chen, missing since 2024. That was my future, someone looking for me. I tried to fight back, started thinking in Mandarin, something my grandfather taught me when I was little. The signal got confused for a second, started stuttering. That gave me an idea. My grandfather used to fix old radios, and he always said the best way to break interference was with an analog disruption. I remembered there was an old copper grounding wire under my seat, probably from the previous owner. I grabbed that wire and touched it directly to my radio. The signal screamed. This high-pitched shriek came through every speaker in my cab. The windows started cracking and I felt blood running from my nose. The road around me started flickering between modern asphalt and old gravel, like time itself was jumping back and forth. The other truckers started moving. I could see them in my mirrors, their rigs sparking to life after God knows how many years. Some of them looked confused, like they'd just woken up from a dream. Bill from the 78 Peterbilt got on the radio. His voice was shaky, like he hadn't spoken in decades. "I've been gone too long anyway," he said. We all started driving at once. The signal tried to pull us back. Our engines would stall, then start again, stall, then start. But we kept moving, protecting each other, sharing tricks about how to keep the radios from locking on. Bill told us about an old relay tower on the mountain that shouldn't have been there, bleeding electricity into the air. He volunteered to ram it. "I've already missed 40 years, he said. "What's a few more?" When that tower fell, it exploded in a burst of static so loud I thought my eardrums would burst. Every radio in every truck died at the exact same moment. Suddenly it was 5 a.m. Friday morning. 6 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. I met Bill at a truck stop diner about 50 miles down the road. He was still wearing a Reagan campaign pin, still looked exactly like he would have in 1978. The missing persons database showed 47 truckers had vanished on that route over the years, all found the same year I got trapped. My CB was completely fried. The repair shop said it had an impossible burn pattern. There's a support group of us now. We meet monthly at different truck stops, and we don't allow any electronics at the meetings. The FCC says Channel 19.5 is impossible, but they won't explain why there's still interference reports. I still get nosebleeds at 11:47 p.m. every night. I drive in silence now. No radio, no podcasts, just the sound of my engine. Sometimes I still hear it, though, in the white noise between stations when I'm scanning for weather reports. Those same numbers, starting up again. I leave notes at truck stops now, warning other drivers to skip Channel 19.5. Most of them think I'm crazy. Sometimes I wonder if my exhaustion that night opened a door to something that was always there, waiting. And I wonder if that door is still open, if it's still hunting. These days, I stick to major highways. I use paper maps instead of GPS. Takes longer, but it's safer. I always know what time it is, down to the minute. My body won't let me forget 11:47. We survivors check on each other regularly, make sure nobody disappears again. New truckers still report picking up Channel 19.5. We try to warn them when we can. But honestly, I think some channels exist between spaces, in the gaps where time gets thin. Maybe they're still out there, collecting people who get too far from the main roads, too far from safety. I just drive, and I never, ever touch that dial again. I was 41, been picking up hitchhikers for 20 years. The woman at Millstone Gap during that storm, I should have kept driving. My name's Jim Peterson, from Beckley, West Virginia. Been a long-haul trucker most of my adult life, old-school guy who believes in helping folks out when they need it. After my divorce went through and the kids moved out with their mom, those lonely mountain roads got to feeling pretty empty. I appreciated the conversation, you know? Company policy said no passengers, but honestly, I'd bent that rule plenty of times over the years. Never had a problem with it. This was back in October 2019. I was hauling a load of furniture down Route 16 heading toward Princeton. The Weather Service had been warning about a storm system moving in, but I figured I'd beat it. Around 8 o'clock that night, the rain started coming down harder than I'd seen in a decade. I'm talking about rain so thick you could barely see the taillights of the car 20 feet in front of you. My wipers were going full speed, and it still wasn't enough. The temperature had dropped too. Went from a decent 65 degrees to maybe 40 in about an hour. That cold mountain rain that cuts right through you. I was crawling along maybe 30 miles an hour when I saw her. Standing right there at Millstone Gap, thumb out, getting absolutely soaked. She was wearing this vintage dress, looked like something from the 50s maybe, and no umbrella, no coat, nothing. Just standing there in that downpour like she was waiting for a bus. I thought to myself, this woman's gonna die of hypothermia if someone doesn't help her. I pulled over, hazards on, and she ran to the passenger side. When she climbed in, I noticed a couple things right away that should have been red flags. First, her dress was completely dry. Not damp, not even a little wet. Bone dry. Second, when she shook my hand to thank me, her fingers were ice cold. And I mean cold like she'd been holding ice cubes, not just chilly from the rain. "Thank you so much, Jim," she said, settling into the seat. I didn't think anyone would stop. That's when the third red flag hit me. I'd never told her my name. Hell, she'd just gotten in the truck. "How'd you know my name?" I asked, adjusting my mirrors and pulling back onto the road. "Oh, you told me," she said with this little laugh. Her accent was strange, familiar somehow, like I'd heard it before, but different from the local mountain accents I was used to. "You have 2 kids, don't you, Sarah and Michael? And your ex-wife's birthday is March 15th. I nearly ran us off the road. I'd never mentioned my kids to anyone on this route. Never talked about my ex-wife either. My hands were shaking a little as I glanced over at her, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. That's when I noticed something that made my blood go cold. I couldn't see her in any of my mirrors. Not the rear view, not the side mirrors, nothing. Just an empty passenger seat. But I could hear her talking, could feel the weight of someone sitting there. "I'm sorry, who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't answer right away. When I looked over again, she was staring straight ahead, and the temperature in the cab had dropped noticeably. I could see my breath fogging up, even though I had the heater cranked up full blast. "You used to live in that little blue house on Maple Street," she said quietly. "The one with the oak tree in the front yard. You had a dog named Rusty. Your first girlfriend was Linda Morrison, and you kissed her behind the gymnasium when you were 15. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. She was describing my childhood home, my dead dog from 30 years ago, my first kiss. Things no stranger could possibly know. The radio started acting up then. I'd been listening to a country station out of Charleston, but it suddenly switched to old gospel music, the kind they played in the 50s. Then it changed to jazz from even earlier, scratchy and distant like it was coming from a radio in another decade. "My friend needs help too," she said, her voice sounding different now, older somehow. Just ahead. I wanted to say no, wanted to pull over and tell her to get out, but I couldn't seem to control my own actions. A few minutes later, I saw another woman standing by the road, also in vintage clothing from maybe the 60s. Also completely dry. Also knowing my name when she got in. Here's the thing that still messes with my head. That cab shouldn't have fit 3 people. It was a standard 2-seater, but somehow the space just expanded or contracted. I can't really explain it. The women were sitting there taking up space, but the geometry was all wrong. We picked up a third woman about a mile down the road. She was wearing a flapper dress from the 20s, and when she got in, she looked at me with these dark eyes and said, "Tell us, Jim, would you rather forget or remember?" That's when I realized I was in some kind of game. Every time I answered one of their questions, I could feel myself aging or getting younger. It was physical. I could feel my hair going gray, then dark again. My back aching, then straightening. They knew everything about me, every mistake, every regret, every lie I'd ever told. "You know what we are, don't you?" the first woman asked. "We're all the hitchhikers who died because nobody stopped. But we're also something more." Their faces started to shift then, like whatever was underneath the human appearance was trying to break through, something ancient and hungry. "The real game," the flapper said, "is we're gambling for who gets to live again. We're using your guilt, Jim, all that weight you carry." I started lying then, making up stories about my past, trying to confuse them. Their faces flickered when I did that, like bad reception, and on an old TV. "Who did you fail to pick up in 1999? the first woman asked, her voice sharp now. The memory hit me like a punch to the gut. There was a young man, maybe 20, standing by the road on a cold November night. I was running late, had a deadline to make, and I drove right past him. Found out the next morning he'd been found dead from exposure. Tommy Hawkins was his name. I was his mother, the first woman whispered, and suddenly she wasn't scary anymore, just sad. I've been waiting, searching. Thank you for remembering him. She started to fade, but the other two panicked. They grabbed the wheel, trying to keep me on the road to nowhere. I felt invisible hands wrestling with mine as the truck swerved toward the cliff edge. That's when Tommy's mother fought them off. He's suffered enough, she said, and showed me a hidden logging road. Take it now. The others screamed promises at me. Money, youth, love, anything I wanted, but I gunned it toward that logging road. When I drove through them, they exploded into old photographs that scattered around the cab. When the sun came up, I found 3 vintage dresses on the seats. They disintegrated as soon as the light hit them. The photographs were still there, though. Obituaries from the local paper. All 3 women had died at that same curve, different decades, always during storms. There was a note left behind. Tom forgave you. I forgive you. Forgive yourself. I did some research after that. All 3 had died at that curve, and according to the diner waitress in town, they flagged down trucks during storms, looking for a way home. But they only appear to drivers carrying guilt, feeding on it. I found a support group, other drivers who'd seen them, all of us carrying guilt about someone we'd failed to help. It took years of therapy, but I finally learned to forgive myself. I visited Tommy's grave, Liam. Effed flowers, felt some kind of peace. I still drive that route, but I never pick up passengers anymore. I always call for help instead. Police, ambulance, whoever needs to come. Every year, on the anniversary, I go back to that curve and leave 3 flowers. Sometimes I dream about them, but now they're smiling, peaceful. Maybe guilt manifests itself in the mountains. Maybe the dead really do need closure. Maybe both. I just know I drive alone now and I sleep better at night. I'm 30 years old and I specialize in livestock transport. 3rd generation, actually. My dad hauled cattle his whole life and his dad before him. When I inherited the business last year, I figured I knew everything there was to know about moving animals from point A to point B. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Because the load I picked up from Black Pine Ranch, well, animals don't tap Morse code on trailer walls. At least, they shouldn't. This all happened about 6 months ago, middle of October. I'd been running solo hauls for maybe 8 months since Dad passed, trying to prove to myself I could handle the family business. Money was tight. Truck payments, insurance, the whole deal. So when I got a call about an emergency transport on a Thursday night, I didn't ask too many questions. Should have, though. The voice on the phone was shaky, older guy. Said his name was Earl something. He needed a load moved from Black Pine Ranch up in the mountains, emergency quarantine situation. Stock was sick, he said, but the quarantine lifted at midnight and they needed to be moved immediately to a facility downstate. Pay was double my usual rate, cash on delivery. I told him I'd be there by 11 p.m. Black Pine Ranch wasn't on my GPS. Earl had to give me these hand-drawn directions, all back roads and dirt tracks winding up into the deep mountains. No cell service after the first 20 miles. I'd been hauling in these hills my whole life, but this was territory I'd never seen before. The roads kept getting narrower, trees pressing in on both sides like they were trying to close off the path entirely. Around 10:30, I finally saw lights ahead. Just a few dim bulbs hanging from an old barn. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in 40 years. Peeling paint, sagging fence posts, weeds growing through the gravel. But there were lights on in the barn, and I could see someone moving around. Dai inside. I backed the trailer up to the loading chute and got out to find Earl. He was maybe 70, thin as a rail, wouldn't make eye contact with me, kept looking over his shoulder and saying, they're ready, like he was trying to convince himself. What kind of stock? I asked, looking toward the barn. It was too dark inside to see much of anything. Mixed lot, he said, hands shaking as he signed the paperwork. Nothing you haven't seen before. But when we started loading, I couldn't actually see the animals. Earl said the lights in the barn were broken, just had to trust him. The weird thing was, they seemed to load themselves. I'd hear movement, feel the weight shift in the trailer, but never caught a clear look at what was going in there. The trailer felt wrong. Empty but full at the same time, like the weight wasn't distributed right. Earl handed me a blank bill of lading. "Fill it out when you arrive," he said. "They'll know what to do with them." His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold the clipboard. Then he practically ran back to his house and slammed the door. I heard at least 3 deadbolts click. The first hour driving was when I knew something was seriously wrong. Normal cattle make noise, mooing, shuffling around, that kind of thing. But whatever was in my trailer wasn't making cattle sounds. It was more like coordinated breathing, almost like whispers. And the temperature gauge for the cargo area was going crazy. 120 degrees 1 minute, then down to 10 degrees the next. That's not physically possible. Then there was the movement. Cattle shift around when you take turns, sure, but this was different, systematic, like whatever was back there was organizing itself. I checked my rear camera, the one that shows inside the trailer, and saw nothing. Empty space. But I could still feel the weight, still hear that breathing. Aro, at midnight, I heard the first tapping. Deliberate, rhythmic. I know Morse code. Dad taught me when I was a kid, thought it was useful for truckers. The tapping spelled out, "Help." I pulled. Over on the shoulder, hands shaking. Got out and walked around to the back of the trailer. Everything looked normal from the outside, but I could hear something testing the door latches. Intelligent, systematic testing. Like something was trying to figure out how to get out. Through the ventilation slats, I caught a glimpse of movement. Too many legs. Eyes that reflected light the wrong color. Not cattle eyes. Not any kind of animal eyes I'd ever seen. The tapping started again. This time it was full sentences. "We trade." Then, "Fair deal." I got back in the cab and started driving, but I also started thinking. I pulled out my phone when I hit a patch of service and Googled Black Pine Ranch. What I found made my blood run cold. The place burned down in 1897. No survivors. Before it burned, there were reports of some kind of agricultural experiment going wrong. Crossbreeding program that was shut down by the government, then covered up. The tapping continued. Need spread. Help us. Or everyone. That's when I understood. These weren't animals. They were something else. Something that had absorbed the livestock, the drivers who'd hauled for them over the years, maybe even the people who'd worked at that ranch. An amalgamation. And they were infected with something that would spread if they got out. The worst part was realizing that my trailer was bigger inside than it should be. Physics was breaking down around whatever was back there. The space was expanding like they were changing reality itself to fit their needs. Around 2 a.m. they entered the cab. I don't know how they did it. Came through the vents somehow, even though the vents weren't big enough for anything larger than a mouse. But suddenly I could feel them surrounding me, pressing against the walls of the cab. They didn't attack, though. Instead, one of them formed something like a mouth and spav. "We were like you once," it said. "Farmers. Families." Then they showed me visions. The failed experiment. Decades of hunger. Other drivers they'd absorbed, still conscious somewhere in that mass, screaming. They offered me a choice. Join them willingly and help them reach population centers, or fight and end up like the others. That's when I remembered Dad's emergency flare gun under the passenger seat. The first flare made them recoil, screaming. Fire was their weakness. I remembered passing an old incinerator facility on the way up the mountain, one of those places they used to burn medical waste. I told them it was a new ranch, fresh livestock waiting. In their hunger, they believed me. I drove back there as fast as I could, them pressing against the trailer walls, excited about the prospect of food. When I backed up to the incinerator loading dock, they practically threw themselves inside. That's when I sealed the doors and fired up the system. The screaming was inhuman. The whole building shook. They pleaded with voices I recognized. Children, families, people they'd absorbed over the decades. "Please," they said. We just want to live. But I thought about my family, my wife, the world they'd consume if they got out. I held firm. The incinerator overloaded and exploded. I ran as the building collapsed. Then silence. I told the authorities it was an electrical fire. No proof of what had really been in there, just ash. But it wasn't over. A week later, there were news reports of mysterious livestock illness in the next state over. They'd survived somehow. Some had escaped. They were spreading, adapting, learning from their mistake. I've learned that Black Pine wasn't the only ranch. There are others scattered across the country. Other drivers report similar loads, similar experiences. We've started a network, sharing information, trying to track the outbreaks. I can't haul livestock anymore. When I look at normal cattle now, I see things that aren't there. Or maybe they are there, and I'm just seeing them now. Food rots when it gets near me. They marked me somehow during that night. In my dreams, they visit me, show me what's coming. A world consumed. We're fighting back as best we can, mapping locations, warning drivers, reporting outbreaks to authorities who don't believe us. But they're still out there, still spreading, still waiting. Looking back now, I realize some loads shouldn't be delivered. Some things shouldn't exist, but they do exist, and they're patient. They've learned from their mistakes. Next time, they won't make the same errors. I still drive, but only dry goods now. Electronics, furniture, that sort of thing. My wife asks why I won't take livestock jobs anymore. The money was better. I tell her I'm getting too old for that kind of work. She believes me. But sometimes late at night when I'm on a long haul, I hear tapping on the trailer walls. Morse code spelling out messages I don't want to read. And I know they're still out there, in ranches with names that don't show up on GPS, waiting for the next driver desperate enough to take a job that pays double the usual rate. Maybe that driver will be smart enough to ask the right questions. Maybe they'll turn around when their GPS stops working. Maybe they'll refuse to load cargo they can't see. Maybe, but probably not. Because when you need the money, when you're trying to prove yourself, when you're just doing the job your father did and his father before him, you don't think about the cargo tapping messages on your trailer walls. At least, you don't think about it until it's too late. I was 36 when this happened, hauling furniture from Nashville to Atlanta for a moving company. Had my engineering degree sitting at home doing nothing while I drove truck to pay off student loans. Life was finally coming together though, getting married next month, and Sarah was pregnant with our first kid. Everything was working out for the first time in years. That rest stop at mile marker 47 on I-75 has had me trapped for what feels like 8 months now, though honestly, it might have only been 8 minutes. Time doesn't work right there. I'd been driving for about 6 hours when my bladder decided it couldn't wait another mile. You know how it is. When you gotta go, you gotta go. The rest stop looked normal enough, just your standard highway facilities with a couple vending machines and fluorescent lighting. It was 3:17 a.m. according to my dashboard clock, and mine was the only truck in the lot. Single street light casting this yellow glow over everything, and the bathroom door was already propped open like someone had just walked through it. I parked under the light and grabbed my keys. The air felt thick like right before a thunderstorm, but the sky was clear. As I walked toward the bathroom, I saw someone ahead of me walking the exact same path. Same height, same clothes, same everything. It was me. Not a reflection or anything. There weren't any mirrors around. This was actually me, maybe 20 feet ahead, wearing my same Carhartt jacket and work boots, walking to the same bathroom. I stopped walking. The other me didn't. He kept going, opened the bathroom door, and went inside. I waited maybe 30 seconds, then followed him in. The bathroom was completely empty. 3 stalls, 2 urinals, nobody there. I checked every stall, all empty, doors hanging open. The other me was just gone. When I walked back to my truck, it wasn't where I'd parked it. Same T, Ruck, same license plate. Keys still dangling from the ignition like I'd left them. But it was parked on the other side of the lot now, under a different light. My phone still said 3:17 a.m. It had said 3:17 a.m. for about 20 minutes at that point. That's when I started noticing the others. 7 different versions of myself scattered around the rest stop. One was walking to the bathroom like I'd just done. Another was coming back from it, looking confused. One was standing by his truck checking his phone. One was getting back in his cab. One was pulling out of the parking lot. And one was just arriving, turning into the lot with his headlights sweeping across everything. They were all at different stages of the same visit I was making. Same clothes, same confused expressions, same truck. But they couldn't see me, and I couldn't interact with them. When I shouted at the one walking to the bathroom, he didn't even turn around. We were in different layers or something, all overlapping but separate. I started seeing other trucks too, dozens of them, phasing in and out of existence. Different models, different years, but all truckers. All making the same emergency bathroom stop, all trapped in their own loops. A Peterbilt from the 80s materialized next to my Freightliner, then faded out. A newer Kenworth appeared where the Peterbilt had been, then it disappeared too. The pattern became clear after I'd been watching for a while. Every trucker who'd ever stopped at this rest stop was stuck here, cycling through their visit over and over. Past and future all happening at the same time, layered on top of each other. I could see pieces of conversations happening 30 years apart. Trucks from decades I hadn't even been alive for. Something in bathroom stall number 3 was causing all of this. The door wouldn't open when I tried it. Not locked, just wouldn't budge. When I kicked it hard enough, my foot went right through it like it was made of fog, but the door stayed solid for me to see. Inside the stall, there was a hole. Not in the floor or the wall, but in reality itself. I could see all the different times at once through it. Every visit to this rest stop, all layered and twisted together. Through that hole, I saw the original event, a truck crash in 1977. The driver had been hauling something for the government, some kind of experimental cargo. When his truck went off the road and hit the rest stop building, something broke loose from his trailer. A piece of time itself, if that makes any sense. The driver fell through the hole it created, and he'd been trying to climb back up ever since. Every person who stopped here became a rung on the ladder he was using to climb back to the surface. I was rung number 8,746, according to some calculations I found scratched into the bathroom wall. He needed 10,000 to make it back to normal time. I found a way to write messages to the other time layers by scratching words into the metal stall divider. The scratches would appear in different time periods, and other truckers could respond. That's how I learned about the network. All of us were aware of what was happening, all trying to figure out how to escape together. A trucker from 2019 had figured out the pattern and was sharing the solution through these wall messages. We had to synchronize. All of us, every trucker from every time period, had to move together and collapse all the loops at once. The coordination was incredible. We used horn blasts to communicate across decades. 3 short blasts meant ready. 5 long ones meant now. When we finally did it, the whole rest stop started shaking. The building phased in and out of existence. Streetlights from different eras flickered on and off. And the original driver became visible, climbing up through that hole in stall 3. He was about 60, wearing a 1970s trucker uniform, and he'd been climbing for 47 years. His face when he reached the surface, grateful, but desperate. Every rung he'd climbed had erased that trucker from existence. We'd been paying for his mistake with our lives, our futures, everything. But here's the thing. When we voted across time using our horn blasts, we decided to help him anyway on one condition. He had to fix what he'd broken. The final push was all of us driving in circles around the rest stop, creating some kind of time vortex. Every truck from every era, all moving together. The original driver got pulled up through the hole, solid and real for the first time in decades, crying like a baby. He told us his story while we worked to seal the breach. He'd been transporting a fragment of time itself for some classified government project. When it broke loose in the crash, it tore a hole in reality. He knew how to seal it, but he needed pieces from all our timelines to create the patch. Each of us had to give up something, a memory, a moment, a small piece of our own time, to fix the damage. When we sealed it, everything snapped back to normal. All of us returned to our own proper times, but we remembered everything. I've got a photo on my phone that shouldn't exist. All of us truckers standing together outside the rest stop, People from the 70s through 2025 all in the same picture. The timestamp says 3:17 a.m., but there are shadows from different times of day. Mile marker 47 is permanently closed now. Official reason is a sinkhole, but we know better. The rest stop building is gone, just a patch of empty asphalt with Jersey barriers around it. But all of us who escaped, we stay in contact. We've got a group chat that spans decades somehow, warning other truckers to avoid that stretch of I-75. I made it to Atlanta on time, delivered the furniture, and got married like I'd planned. Sarah had our daughter 6 months later, but I don't drive long hauls anymore. Took a desk job with the engine. Airing degree I'd been ignoring. Some experiences change you, make you appreciate normal time, normal reality. I still check my phone obsessively whenever it shows 3:17, making sure the minutes actually change. To this day, when I pass mile marker 47, I can feel that thickness in the air again. Like time wants to bend there, but something's holding it steady. The patch we made is holding, but I still floor it through that section of highway. Some places are meant to be left alone. I was 33, hazmat certified, and didn't believe in anything I couldn't explain with chemistry. That was before Black Mountain ate my entire truck and offered me a trade I still have nightmares about. My name's Rosa Martinez, and I'm from Houston originally. Got my chemistry degree but chose trucking instead because I liked the freedom. No boss breathing down my neck, just me and the road. I was single by choice back then. Loved the solitude. The only person I really stayed in touch with was my mom, who was fighting cancer. I sent her money every month from whatever runs I could pick up. This particular job was routine stuff. Non-hazardous chemicals for water treatment, heading up to a plant in Virginia. Nothing dangerous, nothing complicated. I'd been driving for 7 years by then, knew the routes like the back of my hand. But that morning, dispatch called and said there'd been a rock slide on my usual path through the mountains. Had to take a detour through Black Mountain Pass instead. I should have known something was wrong when I couldn't find that pass on any of my maps. Not the paper ones, not the GPS. Dispatch insisted it was a real road, though, gave me coordinates that led to this narrow 2-lane that cut straight through the heart of the Appalachians. The asphalt looked new, which was weird for a mountain road nobody seemed to know about. It happened around noon, when the sun was directly overhead. I was doing maybe 45, taking my time on the curves, when I felt the truck start to sink. Not like a flat tire or mechanical problem. The whole rig was descending straight down through solid asphalt like it was quicksand. I hit the brakes, threw it in reverse, tried everything. But the road surface above me stayed perfectly intact. I could see it through my windshield, normal blacktop, while my truck kept dropping through it like it wasn't even there. The weirdest part was I could still breathe, still move around. It wasn't like being underground, more like being somewhere else entirely. My engine was still running, headlights still worked, but they weren't illuminating anything, just this empty darkness that seemed to go on forever in every direction. That's when my CB radio crackled to life, and a voice came through that sounded like rocks grinding against each other. "Welcome, Rosa Martinez," it said, and I swear the words came from everywhere at once. "I am Black Mountain. I am billions of years old, and I am very, very hungry." I thought I was losing my mind. Had to be some kind of gas leak, hallucinations from bad fumes. But the voice kept talking, explaining things that made no sense, but felt absolutely real. It told me it was alive, that it fed on metal and rubber and the memories of every road that trucks like mine had ever traveled. That's when I started seeing the other trucks. They were floating in the darkness around me, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Rigs from every era you could imagine, some that looked like they were from the 50s, others that were clearly modern. All of them just suspended there like they were underwater, but there was no water. "You're not the first," the mountain's voice rumbled, "and you won't be the last." The drivers were still alive, still inside their cabs, aging slower than they should have been. Some of them had been here for years, maybe decades. They'd built this weird society inside what the mountain called its stomach, working together to survive in impossible conditions. Time moved differently here. I'd been gone for what felt like days, but when I checked my phone, which somehow still worked, Only minutes had passed in the real world. The mountain explained that it kept us alive because we had a job to do. We were supposed to break down the trucks, feed the pieces to the mountain walls, help it digest faster so it could grow and spread. There was this guy, Charlie, who'd been there since 1962. He was like the unofficial leader, the one who negotiated with the mountain. He told me the rules. Keep the mountain happy by maintaining its digestion process, and it would provide us with air, water, and this strange food that tasted like nothing but kept us alive. The catch was we could never leave, but we also never really died, never aged normally. The mountain wanted me special because of my chemistry background. It figured I could help it digest faster, help it spread to other parts of the mountain range, because that was the really terrifying part. Black Mountain wasn't alone. The whole Appalachian chain was connected, all the peaks talking to each other, sharing information. For a while, I have to admit, it was tempting. My mom's medical bills would disappear. No more struggling, no more worrying about money, just peace and this weird kind of immortality. But there were other truckers who weren't buying it. They were fighting back, sabotaging the mountain's growth, trying to find a way out. That's when I realized my cargo might be the key. See, the chemicals I was hauling weren't dangerous to humans, but they could be toxic to certain types of biological systems. If the mountain was truly alive, truly biological, then maybe I could poison it. The risk was huge, though. It might kill everyone inside, including all the innocent truckers who'd just gotten unlucky like me. Then this woman trucker from 1978, Janet, told me about the mouth. Every living thing that eats has to have a mouth, she said. She'd lost her husband trying to reach it, but she thought she knew the way. You had to drive through the mountain's digestive system, navigate around stomach acids and crushing pressures, and all the other vehicles it had consumed over the decades. The mountain knew what I was planning. I could feel it reading my thoughts, trying to close off passages, speed up its digestion to trap me permanently. But the other truckers' stars, Ted helping, holding open pathways even as the mountain's acids dissolved them. They sacrificed themselves so I could reach the mouth. I'll never forget that drive. Crushing pressure all around, the smell of metal dissolving, the sound of other trucks being ground up by forces I couldn't even comprehend. But I could see light up ahead. Real sunlight, the actual world. The mountain's mouth was closing, though. It knew I was coming. So I made it a deal at the last second. I'd give it the road knowledge it wanted in exchange for my freedom. Except I lied. I fed it false routes, convinced it that oceans were just really wide roads, sent it heading toward the Atlantic coast. I shot out of that mountain like a bullet from a gun. My truck was destroyed in the process, but I was alive. And behind me, I could feel Black Mountain actually moving, causing earthquakes as it headed for the ocean like I'd told it to. When it reached the water and tried to consume the Atlantic Ocean, it drowned, just like that. All the truckers it had consumed over the decades came pouring out as the mountain died, all of them the same ages they'd been when they were taken, even though some had been missing for 50 years. The government covered it up, of course, called it a methane pocket explosion, relocated all the freed truckers, gave us new identities and enough money to start over. But we stay in touch, those of us who survived. We formed this informal network, warning other drivers about routes that seem too good to be true, roads that don't show up on official maps. I still drive truck, but I stick to highways now, major interstates with lots of traffic. I've marked my maps with all the places I think might have living mountains, and I share those warnings with anyone who'll listen. Most people think I'm crazy, and that's fine. I'd rather be crazy than see another driver disappear into something that should be just rock and dirt. Sometimes, late at night on a lonely stretch of road, I still hear that grinding voice on my CB radio. Not Black Mountain. That one's dead. But there are others out there, hungry ones, patient ones, waiting for the next truck to take a wrong turn. I don't talk about this much. Hell, I've never told the full story to anyone until now. But if you're a driver, or if you know someone who is, just remember, if your GPS is leading you down a road that doesn't exist on any map, turn around. Some shortcuts aren't worth taking. My mom beat her cancer, by the way. I never told her where the money for her treatment really came from. Some stories are too dangerous to share, even with family. But every month when I send her that check, I remember the price other people paid so I could escape that mountain's hunger. And I make sure to stick to roads that actually exist. I'm 45 years old, and I've been driving these mountain roads for 23 years now. Started when I was fresh out of the Marines, needed steady work and medical supply delivery, paid decent. My name's Eugene Washington, originally from Birmingham, but I've been all over Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, and the Carolinas more times than I can count. Never missed a delivery in all those years. Never even came close. My wife Sarah passed 2 years back, cancer, and honestly, the driving helps. Keeps my mind busy. Our boy Marcus just shipped out to Paris Island last month, following in his old man's footsteps, so the house feels way too quiet these days. The long hauls are good for me right now. Give me time to think, or sometimes not think at all. That's probably why I took the emergency run that night, even though I was supposed to be off duty. The call came around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. Emergency insulin delivery to a mountain clinic up near Ravens Point. Some kind of supply chain mix-up left them short, and they had 3 diabetic kids who'd run out by morning if we didn't get it there. The regular driver had called in sick, and dispatch knew I lived closest to the depot. Easy money, and those kids needed their medicine. I've never been one to say no when people need help. Weather report said clear skies all night, maybe some light morning fog in the valleys, nothing unusual. I loaded up the refrigerated unit, checked the temperature controls twice like always, and headed out around 9:30. The route was familiar. Interstate 65 north to Highway 31, then a series of winding mountain roads I'd driven hundreds of times. Should have been there and back home by 2 a.m., maybe catch some sleep before my regular Thursday run. Everything was normal for the first hour. Radio playing classic rock, truck running smooth, cool October air coming through the vents. I'd made this ex-is. Act run probably 50 times over the years. The mountain clinic always paid their bills on time, never gave me any trouble. Just another Tuesday night delivery. Then I saw the fog. It was sitting about 2 miles ahead, right where the road curves around Ravens Point. Looked like a solid wall of white across both lanes, maybe 50 feet wide, stretching up higher than my headlights could reach. But here's the thing. The weather report hadn't mentioned any fog banks. And when I checked my mirrors, the road behind me was crystal clear. Stars out, no humidity in the air, perfect visibility for miles. I slowed down as I got closer, thinking maybe it was just a low cloud that got stuck between the mountains. Happens sometimes. But as my headlights hit it, I could see this wasn't natural fog. It was too thick, too uniform. And it was moving, not drifting with any wind, moving deliberately, like it had somewhere to be. When I was about 100 yards out, the fog started moving toward me. Not fast, just a steady glide across the asphalt, keeping pace with my truck. I eased up on the gas, and the fog slowed down too. When I sped up, it matched my speed exactly. When I came to a complete stop, it stopped too, maintaining that same 50-foot distance between us. That's when I got on the CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Snowball Eugene. Anybody got eyes on this fog bank at Ravens Point? A voice crackled back immediately. This is Cherokee Charlie, about 5 miles north of your position. Clear as day up here, Eugene. What fog you talking about? Another voice chimed in. Moondog Mike here, coming up behind you maybe 10 miles south. Beautiful night down here, buddy. You feeling all right? I looked in my mirrors again. Clear road. Looked ahead through my windshield. Solid wall of white fog, maybe 75 feet away now. It had gotten closer while I was on the radio. Never is, or mind, I said. Probably just tired eyes. But I wasn't tired, and my eyes were working just fine. I threw my empty coffee cup out the window, just to see what would happen. The fog seemed to react to it, rippling slightly where the cup disappeared into the white. Then, maybe 10 seconds later, something bounced off my windshield. It was a coffee cup, but not mine. This one was rusted, aged-looking, like it had been sitting outside for months. That's when the temperature started dropping. My dashboard thermometer read 72 degrees outside when I first saw the fog, normal for October in Alabama. But as the fog crept closer, that number started falling. 65, 60, 55. By the time it was 30 feet away, the outside temp was showing 31 degrees, and ice was forming on my windshield. I turned the heat up full blast, but it didn't help much. I could see my breath inside the cab now. The fog wasn't just cold, it was creating its own weather system around my truck. I tried backing up, but the fog followed. Tried going around it, but it stretched across both lanes and beyond, disappearing into the woods on either side. I was boxed in by something that shouldn't exist, carrying medicine that kids desperately needed, and my logical mind was running out of explanations. That's when I saw the first handprint on my windshield. It appeared from the outside, pressed against the glass like someone was leaning on my truck. But it was just a normal human hand. 5 fingers, right size, nothing monster-like about it. Then letters started appearing in the condensation. S-T-O-P. I hit the gas. I had insulin in the back that couldn't wait for whatever this was. But the fog moved with me, and more letters appeared. P-L-E-A-S-E-S-T-O-P. My fuel gauge was spinning. It had been showing 3/4 full when I left Birmingham, but now the needle was jumping between empty and full like something was messing with the electrical system. The engine kept running fine, though. If anything, it was running better than it had in months. The fog started doing something I'd never seen before. Instead of surrounding the truck, it split apart directly in front of me, creating a tunnel with walls of white on both sides. I could drive forward, but I was driving through fog, not around it, like being inside a cloud that was moving with me. I pulled over and climbed up on my cab to get a better look. Above me, the fog extended up so high I couldn't see where it ended. The stars I'd been able to see just minutes before were gone. It was like being at the bottom of a well made of white. But when I looked down into the fog walls on either side of my truck, I could see shapes moving inside. Lots of them. They looked like people, but I couldn't make out details through the thick mist. Then one of them came closer to the edge, and I could see his face clearly. I recognized him from the news. Billy Carver, a long-haul trucker from Tennessee who'd gone missing about a month ago. His wife had been on TV pleading for information. But there he was, standing in the fog, looking right at me with desperate eyes. I climbed down and got back in my truck, shaking, not from the cold anymore, from pure fear. But as I sat there, more faces appeared at the edge of the fog walls. 3 more men I'd seen on missing person reports over the past year. All truckers, all driving routes through these same mountains. They were trying to tell me something, all talking at once, but no sound was getting through the fog. I watched their lips, trying to figure out what they were saying. Finally, I made it out. Don't stop. Keep driving. Don't let it rest. Behind them, deeper in the fog, something else was moving. Something massive and dark, pushing through the other shapes like they were nothing. I couldn't see what it was exactly, but looking at it made my vision blur and my stomach turn. It was wrong in a way that hurt to think about. That's when I understood. The fog wasn't hunting me. It was running from that dark thing, and somehow it needed my truck, needed my engine to stay ahead of whatever was chasing it. These missing truckers weren't dead. They were trapped, being used as fuel to power the fog's escape. Billy Carver's face pressed against my passenger window, and he mouthed the words, "Help us." I put the truck in gear and started driving. Every time I slowed down, that dark presence got closer and the faces in the fog became more panicked. When I sped up, it fell back and they looked relieved. I was their engine now, keeping them all ahead of something that wanted to catch them. The fog was leading me somewhere specific, not just randomly through the mountains. We were following old logging roads I'd never seen before, heading towards something. My GPS had died completely, but somehow I knew exactly where we were going. The missing truckers' faces stayed pressed against my windows, guiding me with nods and gestures. Then I saw it up ahead, the entrance to an old railway tunnel, boarded up and abandoned. There were concrete barriers across the opening and warning signs about structural collapse. But the fog was pushing my truck faster now, and the faces around me were spelling out words with their hands. TUNNELSAVES. I looked back and could see the dark thing clearly for the first time. It wasn't a creature or a monster. It was an absence, a hole in reality that was trying to swallow everything around it. The fog, the missing truckers, me, my truck. It wanted to erase us all. I hit those concrete barriers at 60 miles per hour. The tunnel was pitch black inside, but as soon as my truck entered, symbols carved into the stone walls started glowing with a blue-white light. The fog poured in behind me, and the missing truckers became solid, human-looking again. Billy Carver was suddenly standing next to my driver's side door. "This is a trap," he said, his voice sounding normal for the first time, "for the thing that's been hunting us. But the trap needs power to work, and that's what your engine provides. We've been doing this for months, finding drivers, leading them here." The dark presence followed us into the tunnel, and reality started bending around it. The walls stretched and twisted, and I could feel the stone sealing itself behind us. The missing truckers formed a circle around the thing, but they weren't fighting it physically. They were fighting for their right to exist at all. "You can choose," Billy said, his hand on my door handle. "Stay and help us keep it contained, or leave now while you still can. But every month, when the moon's full, we'll need a new driver, someone with a truck that runs, someone willing to take a shift." I thought about those diabetic kids waiting for their insulin. I thought about my son Marcus, just starting his Marine Corps training, needing his father to be there for him. But I also thought about this thing, loose in the world, erasing people like they'd never existed at all. "I'll come back," I told Billy. "Every month. I'll take my turn." The fog people held the dark thing back just long enough for me to reverse out of the tunnel before it sealed completely. The last thing I saw was Billy Carver giving me a thumbs up as the stone closed over the entrance. I delivered that insulin right on time. The clinic staff thanked me, signed the paperwork, and never asked why I smelled like winter in October. When I tried to find that tunnel again the next day, the logging road wasn't there anymore. According to county records, no railway tunnel was ever built in that area. But every month, when the moon's full, I get in my truck and drive to Ravens Point. The fog is always waiting for me, and Billy Carver always has that same desperate look in his eyes. I take my shift, keep my engine running, and help them hold that dark thing in whatever prison they've built for it. I still don't miss deliveries. But now I have two jobs, one that pays the bills, and one that keeps the world from getting erased one piece at a time. My son Marcus is doing great at Paris Island, by the way. I haven't told him about any of this yet. Maybe when he's older, when he has kids of his own to protect. Some things are too important to trust to just anybody, but somebody's got to keep the engine running.